All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us to this incredible session, which is, of course, powered by Coalition for Women in Journalism. We're going to be having an interesting conversation that affects us as journalists and affects everyone, really. We're also grateful for all of you joining us. We know very well that people are joining us from different parts of the world, and we recognize that we are also in different time zones. And so we appreciate your time, to be able to have this conversation with us. I have with me very incredible panelists that I'm excited to introduce to you, and I really want to thank you, Dicta, thank you, Gabrielle, and also Ruth for agreeing to this and of course the Coalition for Women in Journalism that have brought us together and continue to highlight the issues that affect us as women journalists, globally, concerns that we all relate to, and also sharing our wins. That's part of what this platform does, not just our challenges. We also have the time to celebrate one another and each other. And so we will now get into it properly. And I'd like to just very briefly tell us about the organization, which is the Coalition for Women in Journalism. It was formed by, Kira Nazish, and that was in 2017 after her over a decade of career, first in Pakistan and then many other countries in the world, where she worked as a foreign correspondent and covering many of the post 9/11 conflicts. It was after her time at the New York Times and access to major American newsrooms that she noticed the inequities and barriers women face here in America and, of course, all over the world. Therefore, that's how Coalition for Women in Journalism was born and has always worked globally to tackle issues that affect women journalists, and that's across all continents. And part of this is press freedom, which is what CFWIG rather, is very passionate about. In the late 2018, many women journalists, in the Coalition for Women in Journalism network in different parts of the world would get targeted, but not the support they needed, and most of them not get noticed or acknowledged. In fact, when some women journalists in our networks in different countries were arrested, house raided, and one went missing, their cases were never documented or lobbied for. And that's really unfortunate. But that's why what we do here, as Coalition for Women in Journalism, to be able to advocate, for change. So in 2018 also, CFWIG, as we do, launched the advocacy program, which now holds a full fledged press freedom newsroom. They have a research and reporting team in several parts of the world and document violations against women journalists from all over the world. As a matter of fact, 128 countries. And I think it's worth, recognizing the efforts and the work that the Coalition for Women Journalists is putting, and of course, we today are beneficiaries and part of it. And so, also on that note, I'd like to just very quickly introduce my panelists, well-seasoned journalists, Dicta, Ruth, and Nina, people who are women, are powerful women, experienced, grounded, seasoned in work as journalists and even communications experts, and you have experience in different parts of the world, different newsrooms, etc., etc. So I'll just take time to just very quickly to introduce each of you. So I begin with you, Gabrielle Lina Mitch. She's a freelance journalist who's based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She started her journalism career in 2006 as a full-time reporter, language translator, and TV and radio news presenter at Mwangaza Radio. She's a fellow, rather, for the International Johnson Program, spending 2 months in Germany, and also intend at Deutsche Welle in Bonn, by the way, my organization. So we are related. So she reports basically policies, justice, health, agriculture, energy, environment, economics, mining, and human rights issues. That's why I say that we have a very rich panelists. Nina, as one working in one of Africa's most troubled nations, she has continued to, represent the work that we do, that we journalists do. So thank you so very much, Nina, and we are happy to have you as one of the panelists today. And also, I moved to Dicta. Dicta is a freelance journalist based in Uganda. whose byline has appeared in several publications, including the Independent magazine, the East African newspaper, and Daily Monitor, where she briefly edited the Wicked magazine. She has won awards, numerous awards, by the way, for her work reporting on infrastructure, on politics, on education, on health, and disaster risk reduction, which is a very crucial part of the work that she does. So, Dikta, again, thank you for being part of us and welcome as a panelist on this session.
Happy to be here.
Great. And so we'll move to Ruth. And by the way, Nina, we know that you had a long day in terms of flights, but we're also very grateful to you that you are here. We totally appreciate that. So we go to Ruth as well. Escobar is a self-driven communications expert with experience in the international and local media industry spanning over 20 years, talking about 2 decades of experience. She is the regional, that's East Africa Deployment and News Gathering Assistant Editor at the BBC World Service, where she manages the East Africa, Horn of Africa, and the Great Lakes daily news and next day news desk agenda for the BBC. I mean, Ruth has done it all. She's been a reporter, a presenter, a producer, a writer, an editor at the BBC, for the last 16 years. So, ladies, and of course, gentlemen, and all of those who are listening to us, it is my pleasure, and delight to welcome all of you to this session. And so we will go straight into the matter. The topic for our session is beyond the headlines, beyond what people read, beyond what we see on television, beyond what we hear on TV, on social media now. We want to talk about the nitty gritty of the work, how we get to what we do and how we're able to deliver given different circumstances that we would have found ourselves in. And so I'd like to begin with you, Ruth. Like I did say in the intro, you've done it all. You've moved from being a reporter, a producer, a presenter, you've gone behind the scenes and you have been in front of camera, you've written articles and all of that. And you have 2 decades of experience, in all of these fields. My first question to you would be the fact that over and over again, we've had these conversations around women, and how sometimes our achievements are limited because you are a woman. But you have interestingly broken that stereotype. And I'd like to know, how did you start and what were the steps that you took perhaps to be where you are and to gain the confidence, the competence, the experience that you have continued to tell incredible stories and continue to work as one of the most seasoned, journalists and editor.
All right. Thank you very much, Amaka, for the opportunity, and also for the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this very important discussion. I know the significance of addressing the challenges that face women during elections is quite important. We really need to emphasize on that, and also highlight, the need to promote equal opportunities for women in journalism. They play a crucial role, just like their male counterparts. In journalism, my career, I can say, was very intentional. I started my career path elsewhere. I trained first as a logistics and a supply chain management person, but I found that to be very routine, very mundane. And I always nursed a dream of getting into journalism. I think most of us always say that, but I was very intentional about that. Even when I got an opportunity to be a writer at the Nation Media Group as an intern, and then later on I went into a syndicated firm, the African Women and Child Features Services, writing features which would then be sold to daily newspapers in Kenya. I still really wanted to be in radio. I felt I had the voice, I had the grammar, the language, and everything. Sorry, I'm not bragging, but it's just like, what I'm saying, being very intentional and focusing on this is what I really want to do. So when I got the opportunity to go into the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation here in Kenya, I looked at, if I really wanted to make it in the industry or in radio journalism, which language or which department would get me quicker to what I really needed. I thought to myself, if I got into like, English radio news broadcasting or presenting or reporting, I don't speak better English than the Englishman himself. And I knew that if I mastered Kiswahili as a language and became very good in it, it would give me a better and faster breakthrough into the BBC that I always wanted to join. So when I got the opportunity to be on the Swahili service of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, I seized it and I gave it my best. And within no time, the British Broadcasting Corporation here in Kenya was announcing opportunities for journalists to join them. They were like relocating their Swahili services morning program to Nairobi, and they needed anchors for that morning show. It was called Amka na BBC, and there came my opportunity. And as they say, the rest is history. Here I am. Um, I was among a team of the first launch presenters and producers and editors of the Amka na BBC, the Swahili morning breakfast show, when it came to Nairobi with the BBC. And the challenge was on us. This is a program or a show that had always been broadcast live from London for over 50 years, and it was coming to Africa for the first time, and you're taking it on, so it's just a believe in yourself to say, let's do it. If it fails, then what's the worst that could happen? We will learn on the job. We will correct ourselves. We'll get the feedback. We'll get the criticism, which is constructive and would help us get better. So we took that on, not just myself, but also with colleagues that are still at the BBC and some who have already left, but it was a success. So, from anchoring that, sorry, I was actually the first producer of that, and then getting on and becoming the anchor and on and on. I've played several roles at the BBC. And just like I said, it's just like, looking at where am I going to be in the next 2 years? What do I need to do or work on to get me to the next level? And ensuring that I did that. Just like, ensuring that if it is a mentoring that I need, if it is, the growing and building of my skills that I need, I knew who to tap into, I knew who to go to get to where I am. And also hard work comes with it. So and I can say that, during this period, lots of opportunities also presented themselves, and I sometimes would be at the right place at the right time. Yeah, so that's a brief of how I got there.
Right, thank you very much. Victor, we see that we had a guest. We had a second guest.
Yeah, sorry.
No, we don't
Sorry,
mind at
I
all. That's
Yeah,
completely
it's a lovely,
understandable.
yeah, it's lovely to see them. I'm also working
Yeah,
from
of
home, and
course.
that's what
They can
we
always
as
share
women
that
journalists,
conversation. Of course,
yeah,
it's
we
part
have
of
to
our reality
balance
too.
between that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. But let me just quickly move to Nina. Nina, you've worked in one of Africa's most troubled nations, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And even as journalists, sometimes when we think of certain areas, you can't help but just to say a word to colleagues who are in those places, because it just not only takes expertise and competence, it also takes a lot of courage. So I want to also ask you, in terms of coverage, what have continued to catch you, to do the work that you do and to do it excellently? I know very well that Ruth, you did mention about, being deliberate and intentional, while you were at the BBC, and mentioning Amkana BBC gave me some sort of good memories, because I love Amkana BBC and I lived in Nairobi for 3 years. It was part of my favorite program. And so, Nina, how have you been able to navigate, in places highly volatile and still maintaining, your professionalism and the excellence that you bring, the unmatched excellence that you bring to work all the time?
Thank you so much for the question. I must say that life hasn't been easy for me as a freelance working in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because, as you said earlier, I worked for 6 years in a privately owned media, which by the time was a media that had to support the government in power. And then I decided to resign and go into freelancing and other parallel activities. So when you're a freelancer, when you are a freelance journalist in the DRC, you have to be very creative. You have to have many initiatives open to the world, and also to be all the time in the field. Like you must be a frontline journalist, not only working from home and waiting for stories on TV and just transcript what you see on TV news or what you listen to radio news. So I made my own way thanks to my perseverance and quality of my stories, which were also appreciated by other media, especially foreign media. So if you are a freelancer in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and when you are like in the field writing a story, doing a story, and you must contact your own sources, and they have their own questions like, what is the name of the media? Is it a local media, international media? Because you don't have a contract anyway, so you just, freelancer. You don't depend on any media, local media or national media. You must like mention one of the biggest names of media, like, okay, I'm working for RFI. Thanks to God, I worked for RFI at a certain time. I also write some stories for CNN and other online publication. And you must take your time to explain to them, okay, like I wrote a story for Discourse Media. It was on energy, and you had to explain. Okay, so Discourse Media is a Canadian media which is based in Canada. So I got the sponsorship from them, and I'm writing a story to just highlight different challenges that Congolese face in terms of electricity, blah 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 blah. So because people, they must like identify you as a journalist working for a renowned media locally or in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or I don't know, because most of the media that people really follow here are like BBC and Voice of America and also other local media. So I was not really in that field. I was working for media that was not really recognized by people. So you had to take your time and explain to them, okay, this is the media that publish these kind of stories, and I'm working for them, and blah 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 blah. I once also produced programs for the Voice of America. It was a half program, and my contact list was like just doctors and specialists and physicians and other stuff. So when people like they listen to your program on radio, because it was broadcast by other media, other local media, and I mean, you always have to to face those kind of challenges because people had to identify you as a journalist working for one of the biggest media, locally known and also appreciated by people. So this is how I just made my own way, and also the passion of also telling stories that could have been ignored by people, and also telling stories to the international level to say what is happening in the country. So a wide range of audience get to know what is happening in the country. So yeah, as I said, life has never been easy being a freelance in the DRC.
Yeah. Nina, I mean, part of what we do also in this group is to recognize each other and celebrate each other and the things that we do. Really, we want to use this opportunity to also thank you for the incredible work that you continue to do in the DRC. You know, we know how difficult that terrain is, and you have always carried on graciously. So thank you. And you also spoke very
Thank you so
powerfully
much.
there about passion. You're welcome. I mean, sometimes if you don't have that passion, you will lose it at some point because I mean, what is keeping you going? You know what I mean, especially in the circumstances that you might find yourself sometimes. And so, on that note, I moved to Dicta, who also has been doing a lot of incredible work in Uganda. Um, Again, just that we talked about DRC, we know that Uganda also Sometimes there are issues with censoring journalists. There are certain things that you can put out. There are certain things that you definitely cannot put out. Or if you do put them out, you'll be watching your backs. So I'm wondering for you too, how has it been? What has been the most challenging or difficult times for you? And what has been your most perhaps joyful moments or the blessings that you have being a female journalist, in a place like Uganda?
Let me start by just saying that one of the most important things when you're a journalist is to try and focus on getting the facts correct. It helps. Sometimes it won't. It will get you in trouble, but one, get the facts correct. Two, have what I would call champions. Like, I remember there is a time when someone tried to sue me. I had just gotten the job as an independent, and like the editor was like, I know Dicta did the background and whatever, and like then he called me, he gave me an opportunity to come and explain myself, and indeed I had done the work. So one, have a reputation, but also have like champions in the space you're in, not necessarily women, because there are not many women in positions of leadership, but have people that know you a bit, know the quality of your work. So that helps. As for my successes, yeah, I've won some awards. I guess those are some of the successes that I would point out. I've won a UN award for reporting faster risk reduction. I won several from the East African community when it used to, because I was reporting a lot on the East African integration. So a few on East African integration. I was also at some point nominated for the CNN African Journalist Award when it was still around. So yeah, those have been some of the ones that I've achieved. But really, I would say try if you can, because I'm not saying it's always easy. Sometimes people who you think should be your champions will sometimes be on the other side trying to push you out. But it's important that you have people that you can go to, even when, because there are times when you're working on a story and like it's not working out well. Someone you can say, hi, can you look at this story for me and show me what I can do better so that it can improve. That's usually something that helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, congratulations again on your awards. I am an advocate of saying that we shouldn't, for any reason, trivialize our successes, no matter how little it is. I think it tends to be women think, you're humble about, and trying to be modest. I think that, you should shine brightly. And when there is opportunity for every one of us to light each other's candles, that we do that, by all means, and celebrate one another. So congratulations on all of your awards. You work hard, by the way, and that's why you have awards to it. It's just a testimonial, if you ask me. But I think I love the fact that you spoke about having champions, and you did say on the back of that they may not necessarily be women, because there are very few women, and that's why part of the reason that we're having this conversation as women journalists, from different parts of the country. You're representing East Africa, as Ruth is representing East Africa. Gabrielle is representing Central Africa, and at the moment I'm in Nigeria and also representing West Africa. And we are also working for international organizations. So, by the way, we're also global journalists. So we understand the nitty-gritties of this work and the need for us to have champions, more female champions. Because the thing is, when you talk about your challenges, it's easy for Ruth to relate to it. It's very easy for me to relate to it. It's easy for Gabrielle to relate to it, because we are women. We have the things that are peculiar to us. And so that's why we all continue to advocate for situations like this, where we have support tribe. And I think that's what you were referencing when you talked about champions. And when I became a fellow of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, the leadership program, one of the words that we've continued to use is being intentional, and also always looking out for who is your support tribe. And I think that that's what you've mentioned there, the importance of support tribe and how that has continued to keep you grounded. Those people that can look at your work and say, listen, Dicta, I know that you could have done better. or dicta, this is excellent, or point you also to the right direction. And that's really great. And so now let's now move a little bit into, coverage, on ground coverage. Particularly, we're looking at elections across Africa. It's interesting. We know how democracies seem to be in Africa. There's also the question of whether Africa is yet practicing democracy, or what we have is imposed democracy, or shall we get to the point where we have what is African democracy and Africans can relate to it. And so every time there are elections, we continue to see irregularities play out. We continue to see a lot of dysfunctionality, if you like. We continue to see a lot of challenges. We continue to hear different voices, international community, the people. Sometimes they are at clash with each other. But all of these things again come to the foot of you as journalists, because you are the ones who are going to tell the stories at the end of the day. We are the ones that are going to explain some of these things to the audience, to those who are listening to us, to those who are reading us. And so I want to now start again. If I go back to Nina, how has it been covering from the front lines, particularly elections?
Thank you for the question. Um, I have already covered elections, I mean, 3 times, because as you know, we also organize like elections in the DRC like 3 times now. So the first elections, I was really at my first years of experience as a journalist, and I had to go on the front line, like going to the polling centers, going to where candidates were applying for the elections. And also sometimes we could like spend all the day there, because candidate had to come and submit the papers. And sometimes you had to write a story, because that story had to be published at night, like at 8 or maybe at 11 p.m. So you could make all your best so the story can be published. Because viewers were also waiting, because at the time the media that I was working for was one of the biggest media, and people were like very, very keen to get the right news from the right source, and we were one of the sources that was appreciated by the people. And I think that was the toughest of all my experience, because it was the first time that Congolese were voting, and also the media was one of the influenced media in the region, and you had to tell the right stories at the right time, and also to be up to date all the time. The experience was very good, because it was also my first time. My first time to also vote for someone, and I was really enthusiastic to share that experience with other people that were experiencing the same thing that I was experiencing at the time. So, and as you know, I still remember, like it's Joseph Kabila who was in power, and in Africa, most of African countries, they know already who will win before the publication of the result. Most of the countries, I'm not saying about Kenya, maybe Uganda and and the Congo and other countries may know may understand what I'm talking about. So the person who is in the power is the one who is gonna win. So people are like, okay, he's the person who's gonna win. He's the president. He's the future president, and blah 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 blah. And yeah, so, and also politicians. When you are a woman, going in the field and covering political stories, you get to meet with other politicians who are not really respectful to you. So they think, given that you are a woman covering political situations, you are a weak woman who can be available to any request that they make. So you had to be strong, to be confident, to be also straightforward. You know what you are doing when you are on the front line. You know what you have been sent for, so you have to like be focused on what you were asked to do. So yeah, these are the challenges that most of women face, especially here. So women journalists, they get to meet with politicians, and when men, when they have money, they think that they can get everything they want. They think that, okay, this person, given that she's one of the popular journalists, she present news on TV, I can get her anyhow I want. I can ask her to go out with me, and she will just say yes, only because you are single, or you are a TV presenter. No.
Mm.
So yeah, these are one of the challenges that I had to face as a journalist. At the time, I was also a TV journalist, so I was presenting news on TV. People were seeing me, people knew me, and also politicians also knew me through TV, and they thought that I was just available for all their requests, all they need. But I was really focused on what I was tasked to do. I was really
Mm.
focused on my mission, and that's what made me stood out from other. So I'm not saying that all the women were very weak with
Mm.
politicians, but here in Congo, politicians, they think they have power, they can do everything, they can get women, they can, yes, those kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so very much, for painting that picture. It has continued to be. I mean, it's so unfortunate that this continues to happen, especially with these crops of people that you mentioned, politicians. They are usually a tough one to crack. But I am grateful that we continue to have female journalists like you who would continue to put them in their place and let them know that it's not business as usual. If you must work, if you must be a politician, whoever you are, you must also understand that female journalists, everyone needs to be respected and not see the agenda, but see the quality of work that they do. And I also like it when there are situations like this where female journalists put their feet on the ground and say, no, this is not acceptable, and continue to call out such shameful behavior. And on that note, also, I'll move to you, Ruth, because, like I said, you have done almost all the roles, right? As an editor, I wonder, how do you come to decision making of assigning, journalists, female journalists, into particular, giving them particular assignments, or okaying that they do certain things? And I give you a quick example. Before I joined Deutsche Welle, I was in Arise News and particularly covered conflict. And in the early days, I always get that thing of, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that because you're a woman. And I always argued that, competence is not gender based, and I say, let my work speak for me. Don't worry about my gender. Be worried that I should be able to deliver for you. That's all that matters. And by the first time I went to cover one of the major abductions in Nigeria, and again, I'm not trying to brag, but again, I say we shouldn't be too modest. We should also recognize our strength. It was a stellar report, coverage, and it broke that chain, if you like. And every other time, all through that year I was in Arise, I covered conflicts back to back, covering literally from ground and the most difficult and volatile areas. And so for you, I'm just wondering, how do you make that decision? And do you also get conflicted where you kind of think, oh, should I send this person? Or maybe you should get this other role because you are a woman. And how does that come across? From the other side, when you hear that, people say maybe in the board meetings or in editorial, and say, oh no, you shouldn't assign a dictator to that now. You should perhaps get one John, or to do it, or one Okech or Omondi to do it. How do you really navigate that?
All right. Thanks, Amaka. I wear several hats as I speak to you this evening because I'm also the vice president of the Kenya Editors Guild, and I'm a member of the Association of Media Women in Kenya. That's AMWIC and the Kenya Editors
Pushing
Guild.
the button.
Thank you. Yeah. So I would like to like speak so much of authority in terms of the Kenya Editors Guild and the Association of Media Women, but also as my role as assistant editor at the BBC. That when you're assigning, I don't think there has been at any time that you have looked at the person as either male or female. It is about the experience, their knowledge, their contacts, the sources and leads of news that they have that will make me as an editor send out somebody to go and work on that story. Because I know that if there are issues that are related to them being female that may stop them from going out on assignment, we may have discussed that already, and it should never come in the way of them delivering on their duties. Because I know that, especially for my organization, I can say that we have policies that promote gender equality and diversity and inclusion. So gender, or your woman, don't go and do this, don't go do that, never comes up, because in fact they encourage more women to come up and tell their stories. At the Kenya Editors Guild, we also are very, like, sort of like, I wouldn't say very progressive, but I can say that currently, as we sit on the council of the Kenya Editors Guild, we were elected in 5 women, you know and it's a very, like, very gender sensitive organization. We have so many women on, and we also have men sitting on the board as trustees, and nobody ever came to me and said, hey, you're a woman, don't go for that seat, because I'm equal to the task. I have proved my worth. I have worked through to get to where I am, and I have proved that indeed I can do it. So as editors and my fellow editors, I know that we have provided equal opportunities for women to cover important stories by ensuring that there's fair representation in every aspect of the newsroom, especially for, like, for my organization. They like, encourage more women to apply for positions and create safe and supportive work environments. The same is also being discussed here in Kenya, in media houses here. The Association of Media Women in Kenya, AMWIC, has actually come up with looking at policies that can make the newsroom more friendly and more, more embrace women more. However, as our colleague Nina from DRC spoke, there are some things that we cannot run away from. And these are, like, one of the challenges that women face constantly is a systematic bias and discrimination that we face in our society, because our societies still remain very patriarchal. You
That's right.
go out there to work on a story and somebody's not looking at you, not because you're a journalist, but they first look at you as a woman. So you're prejudiced, you feel undermined, because they look at your credibility, or they look at the way you're asking questions, and think that you're not worth it. So because of the setup of our societies, that makes it very difficult sometimes to work in some environments, in some places where they're not so embracive of of women. I know that sometimes, like, what Nina said, even getting information, crucial information and leads, or securing interviews, becomes very difficult in male dominated or conservative environments. What Nina was just saying, that the politicians would rather give a heads up or a tip off to a
Mm,
male than they would do to a woman. So that we really need to change, to shift that conversation, about, just when you see me as a journalist out there, it's not because I'm there because I'm a woman, or because I'm a man. It's because I merit, I deserve to be there. And so organizations should come up, with ways to address and have very clear protocols of dealing with matters of ensuring that we have equal spaces to telling our stories. I know that sometimes, especially those women who are still in childbearing ages, you are faced with challenges. You will take time off to go and get your babies, to bring them up and leave them when they're still very young and go into the newsroom. So as an editor, you become empathic, you support them, but you're also supported by policies within your organization that say that when you resume from maternity break, for instance, you are still allowed another 3 months of working half day, so that you can go home and be with your family. So it is the support that we as editors should give to women journalists, so that then they can feel that this place has embraced me. hold their hands during those difficult times of, like, when they're expectant, when they go through those, monthly days when you sometimes are suffering period pains. Many organizations are discussing that at the moment. So embrace them, create safer and proper spaces where women can feel that this is a place where I am welcomed and I can work regardless of what I'm going through, and ensuring that we don't leak as many women as we have done in the past, leaving the newsrooms and going into other, in quotes, friendlier environments or roles. So it's a discussion that is being had through several organizations and through several entities that let's discuss and see how we can support women more. And I hope I've sort of answered how, even from my personal perspective, how we continue supporting each other to make sure that we go through the levels and the ranks and to get to where we are. And like I would say, in Kenya, there are several women who have broken that glass ceiling by just believing in themselves, having mentors, people to hold your hand. And thanks to those strong women whose shoulders we have stood on, it is they who have gotten us to here. And you say, if she did it, then I can do it, because she's just a woman like I am, and she's a journalist like I am.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible. I really love your responses, because what this is doing is we're not just continuing to wallow in this same narrative of women are challenged, women cannot do this because they're women, but we are providing solution. And that's why I'm excited, being in this group, and also hearing that we have women who are in top positions, decision makers. They are the ones that are going to create these policies. For instance, that says you come back from maternity leave, you can still go home, half day to be able to be with your family. If there are no women, particularly, perhaps those policies will not work. And that's why it's crucial. Yeah, it's very crucial that we are seeking answers, we're preparing solutions, that we continue. We don't enforce the narrative, but we provide solutions, just like what you're doing. And that's why really it's important for we to continue to get to those positions, because we have to be intentional, we have to be deliberate, we have to make these things happen. I was in a conference, and then one of the speakers was saying, when we say give women a chance, what we are saying, it also means, for instance, when you have a panel discussion, that you make women appear on the first day. Not, if you go to these programs, maybe women, your speaker will become the last days, or they put you in a small corner. These are the things that
you're boxed into something, like, and that's why our voices need to be heard. And be, as you say, also be authentic about your leadership roles as women. You're not just speaking because for the sake of it, but ensuring that as an editor, where you sit, how much space are you giving to women issues, and not just the usual women issues of talking about cooking, talking about fashion. Women can also talk about the more complex issues about the STEM, the sciences, the technology, and all that. So allow women and try to have stories that reflect diverse perspectives, and encourage women journalists to specialize in areas that traditionally were underrepresented by women. Like you'd imagine that the technology desk has only men writers. Why should it be like that? Can't you grow their talent? Can't you give them opportunity, take them for training, so that then they can understand the nuances of writing tech stories and get them to where they should be? So it's just about try and be more authentic, lead through example, and also give opportunities to others, mentor others, so that they can get to where you are.
Thank you so very much. Mentor others so that they will get to where you are. One of the things that I believe in, is, the way you mentioned how you stood on the shoulders of others, is also being able to pay forward that the younger ones will find a shoulder in us, to stand on, and we continue the work. And Dicta, I saw you all through Ruth's submission, how you were smiling. I would definitely say that you were agreeing with her, in most of the things. But I would also like to. Yeah. Please go ahead, because I would like to hear your thoughts.
So, listening to Ruth, I feel like, I guess Kenya is in a much better position than us, because today, while I was preparing for this, one of the things I came across was a report that shows that in Uganda, there is no single talk show host that is female right now. And
Oh, I'm like, my eyes are
yes,
popping.
so when she said creating spaces for women, I found that interesting, because then at least you know that nearby, close by in the region, this is happening, and therefore it will cross over soon, especially considering that some of the major media owners in Uganda are Kenyan, and therefore maybe it will rub off soon. But yeah, that's why I was smiling at some point. I because like one of the things I also noticed is that we have less than 20% of women as reporters or editors or working in newsrooms. And so you find that there is still a struggle, but like she said, if you have people mentoring and people supporting and people giving advice and holding hands, maybe it will work out at some point. As things stand, at least from where I am standing, it doesn't look like that yet. We've had even women in positions of power, whether editors or not, but somehow the ranks of female reporters is not growing, it's not moving much. So
Yeah,
that's
so
why
just
at some point I
just to
smiled.
interrupt a bit, Dicta, I would just like to say that I'm not saying that the numbers of women of journalists in the newsrooms are greater, but at least they are much better than where we were yesterday or in the days before.
Yeah.
Why? Because of initiatives of organizations such as the Kenya Editors Guild and the Association of Media Women in Kenya coming up with policies that are trying to rectify that imbalance. Just recently, we had a very heated discussion on one of the media platforms here in Kenya about the issue that we always want to run away from, the elephant in the room: sexual harassment in the newsrooms that is perpetrated by male colleagues and sometimes even female colleagues who are in places of authority against their juniors. When you're in a supervisory role, then you're harassing this young person and asking for sexual favor so that then they can get this and this and this. Is still something that we are very well aware of. We will not pretend and bury our heads in the sand and say it's not there. However, we are coming out and we are speaking against it. Unlike in the past where people would be so afraid and not speak about it, now people are speaking about it and looking at ways to address that, getting into places where we can discuss and say this is wrong, it has to be corrected. Sexual harassment policies have been set up by several organizations. Feel empowered to report on that. But how many would be willing to do it? Do you want to spill the beans and lose your paycheck? Or do you want to keep mum and continue, earning? It's always like, a moral issue that sometimes is a struggle. But Dicta, let me tell you the importance of networks, the importance of reaching out. You have mentioned in Uganda. I would like, through the Association of Media Women in Kenya, that we come to Uganda and empower women journalists there to feel that they can also run a talk show in Uganda. What is so hard in running a talk show?
I'm not sure that it's a lack of female journalists who can run the talk show. It's just that sometimes it's
capacity building.
Or positions.
No.
Sorry.
It's because you see, especially for political shows, you feel like in many cases it's the men listening, or the people who make decisions think it's the men listening, and based on that they make decisions on who they can host. Not long ago there was a talk show host who is female, a fairly popular talk show at Radio 1, but she no longer hosts it. It's back to a man. So that's like, it's not just lack of capacity, it's more complicated. It's more in the traditions, it's more in the perceptions of what the leaders of newsrooms, the leaders of media houses think. So it's complicated, and capacity is good, but also pressure on media houses, media house owners, media house leaders would probably do some good. And same study also showed that they invite about 30-35% of women, but they only contribute about 20% of the time, and the camera focuses mostly on the men than the women. So like I said, it's complicated. It's not so much capacity, it's also the psyche, it's also, I guess, also the number of women coming through newsrooms, because there are also not so many. So it's complicated. It's capacity, but it's also I guess, capacity for the newsroom leaders and media house leaders.
All right, Dicta, I'm not taking words off you, but I mean, thank you so very much for that. And also, Ruth, for the practical examples that you're bringing into this. I know that Nina, on the other hand, Gabriel is listening, and I will come to you. But I also think that part of the things that we do, in terms of our being intentional, is also to see opportunities in issues like this. I like how Ruth jumped in and to say, we're happy to come to Uganda, and build
Yeah.
capacity or whatever, if that's what it takes. Because what is there in,
Here we are.
so
Yeah.
that's the thing this group like this does for us. The power of networking and sharing abilities. I
That's
also
important.
and I also think that you must not forget that the role that your platform has, your social media platform as an individual. I mean, I presume CFIW permission to say perhaps this is also a conversation that you can have. You could start a podcast. You could start off as that and begin that conversation from your own space. You could partner with someone like Ruth from neighboring country. You could have Nina, three of whatever. There are endless
No,
possibilities, and
actually,
that's right.
with podcasts, there are people, there are women that I know that host podcasts. So, yeah, but internet penetration is not so great. People who actually have internet just stay on social media. But yeah, that's a very good idea. Even Twitter Spaces, there are people who are on Twitter doing Twitter
Yeah,
Spaces.
we could start from
Yeah,
somewhere.
so yeah, there is a place to start. That's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you so very much for that. Now, I will go to Gabrielle, who's been patiently listening, because we want to also now move to another aspect of our conversation. Beyond we doing the work as journalists, covering, talking about our challenges and providing solutions. Let's also talk about, this era of so much of fake news, so much of disinformation and misinformation, right? And how that has continued to affect our work as journalists. What's your assessment, Gabrielle, of audience perception? How very palpable do you think that the idea, fake news and misinformation is, and how has that affected your work?
Um, I think as a journalist living in a continent where people are not really, really educated, like the literacy rate is very high in Africa, for sure. In my country, for example, people don't like reading, like going through a long text, trying to find an information or an important news to him, something that can, draw his attention. So, in my opinion, I think we must try in our way of writing articles to try and streamline what we write for our audience. We must maybe put forward visual content more than writing, because we live in a continent where people don't like to read and they prefer to believe in what they see than understanding what they can read in a writing article. So instead of writing, like, for example, 100 words to say that there's been a coup in Gabon, or there's been a coup in Burkina Faso, blah, 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 we must try to just go straight forward from the first sentence of our story. So based on my experience and from my personal perspective, I think people, they believe more visual content than the writing content. I will just give an example of Facebook, because this is where misinformation and fake news come from. It's especially from social media. And in this era of social media, people are, visual content draw their attention more than writing content. So when you post something without pictures, for example, on Facebook, it won't generate an engagement on that post. But when you post something with visual content, it will generate, a double engagement on that content, because maybe it's drew attention of people who don't like to go through a text and try to understand what they want to understand. So I think during this era of social media, writing is really on the wane, and visual photos, infographics are the communication method that really pack a big punch, because especially in Africa, people are not well educated. Literacy rate is very, very low, and people understand better what they see than what they read.
Right. I was just, for a moment, I was trying to process one of the things you said, which is in Africa, people are not well educated. I tend to know what you mean, but I also think that we need to also be very, very careful that we're not enforcing the whole narrative of Africa being this continent that is continuously has remained backward. I know, but I do completely understand what you're saying, and thank you for that intervention
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So sorry for the word that I used. I mean, I meant by not well educated, like people are not like, I was referring to the literacy rate, because
Great, yeah.
I don't know, in Nigeria, maybe in those rural areas where you find people who maybe don't know how to read
That's
and write.
mhm.
So if you show him a content with writings, they will not understand, but they will
Okay.
understand what the visual content that they can interpret in the way, like when they see like the president goes to this and this and this, they see the visual content and they understand better. But when you
Right.
write a story on on something, they would hardly understand that. So I think it's in terms of that context that I wanted to say, well
Hmm.
educated. I know in Africa we are really, we have good universities, we have good schools, but when you go to the rural areas where they are our concentrated population, people, they don't know how to read and write.
I think yes, I hear you. I know what you mean. There's also abundance of indigenous knowledge in Africa, but yes, the
Yeah.
literacy part. Yes, I recognize what you're saying. So I will also now move to Ruth on the same question. Unfortunately, it's crazy. I can't believe it that we are almost out of time.
Yeah, it runs too fast when you really need to discuss, the issues that are at hand. Eh?
So I'm going to also just pass the same question to you, Ruth. Wearing, with all the hats that you're wearing as well, what's your assessment in terms of, misinformation, and perhaps what more can we do to be able to remain the credible sources that people can run to, such that even if perhaps if you post something on your WhatsApp status or on your Facebook or whatever, or
Mhm.
social media, people will say if it is from Ruth, is definitely true and correct. If Ruth has posted this, if Dicta says this, you can be
Mhm.
sure that it is verified, it is factual. What more can we
Yeah.
do?
Um, I'd say that we're living in an era where it's become like, fake news and misinformation and disinformation is like, all over. And we are constantly faced by that challenge as editors, wherever we are seated, that, the purveyors of fake news have intentions. They know why they're trying to do that, like sometimes just sensationalize the news or get, clickbait, or even, spread propaganda for whatever reasons very well known to them. However, for
Yeah.
us as editors, as reporters, fact checking and verification are very important, aspect of the newsroom, to ensure that, we're just not ensuring accuracy, but we're also helping in combating misinformation. And why should we ensure accuracy? Why should we preserve our credibility? Is because any moment you are cited for having put out an inaccurate story, or you're
Mhm.
cited for having put up a fake story, do you know how many readers, or what the number of audience that you're going to lose? Do you know
Yeah.
how your credibility is going to be punctured if you put out fake news? And that's why I come from a background of, in my organization, ensuring that you'd rather be late on the news, on the story, and be right, than be fast and be wrong. because
Exactly.
the consequences or the effects of being wrong in the bid to be fast can never be done away with, because as journalists, as media, we are always rated by the last byline or the last story
Mm,
that we ever told. So what is
that's
the last
so.
story you ever told? Is that the way you want to be regarded? Is that the legacy you want to put? And if it is, then continue building trust with your audience by ensuring that you're fact checking, verify your information, ensure that the stories you're publishing are based on factual and reliable sources. And the only
Mhm.
way to do that is diligently fact checking and verifying with more than two credible sources. In fact,
Right.
make it three now in this era of fake news. Ensure that you have pictorial evidence, and it can be, use reverse pictures to shots to ensure that the story is true. We also have
Mhm.
a responsibility to ensure that whatever we are putting out there is balanced, is based on facts and nothing but facts.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I
that
agree.
I know I don't have so much time. I would like my colleagues to also talk, but I would go on and on and on about this fake news and misinformation and all that we
Yeah.
are dealing with at the moment. Because
Mhm.
nowadays you find that even bloggers have become sources of news, and
Yes.
it's competitive. It is tight. It's visuals, but just remember that you have to keep your integrity as journalists to ensure that tomorrow the readers will still come to you or will still listen to you.
Thank you so very much. That makes
Thank
a
you.
lot of sense. So I'll give the final word on that to Dicta. What are your thoughts? And very briefly, if you can, so that we'll be
Okay,
able to
so
wrap. Yeah.
I guess I'd say the same thing. Fact check what you've because it's your reputation on the line. So make sure you check that what you're putting out is correct. But also, because there is this thing of people going in WhatsApp groups and sharing with themselves all sorts of things, and try and give access, provide news to the population, because sometimes when there is a vacuum, that's how fake news comes to fill that gap. So provide the content that is reliable, but also make sure it's well balanced and well checked, and people won't say it's biased. I guess that's all I can say.
All right. I think that this has been very incredible conversation. You all have brought a lot of insight, different angles to this conversation, moving from your work as journalists on ground, challenges and providing solution, and now also talking generally on how we can combat fake news and misinformation, and how very crucial our roles, as journalists and media personnel are. And I think that this is a gospel that we'll continue to preach. We will continue to advocate, on leadership, quality leadership from our sides, as women, decision makers, being able to bring the positive change that we continue to talk about, so that we change the
Mhm.
narrative. We're at a point where we want to see the narrative changed. We've heard over and over again about the stereotypes. We now want to continue to
Yeah.
enforce solutions, and to continue to point the light to women journalists who are bringing solution and talk
Mhm.
about it, continually talk about it. Let it sink, let everybody get used to it. That's how things change. That's how policies become very effectual. And
That's
so
right.
on that note, I like to just say, perhaps each of you may want to just say your final thoughts. I give each of you 30 seconds. I begin with Nina, and then we'll go to Dicta, and then I conclude with Ruth. Nina, please.
Uh, g- Thank you so much, ladies. Thank
Alrighty.
you for this amazing conversation. I really liked it. I learned a lot from you guys. Thank you so much.
Great.
Also, let's really stay steadfast and focus on our work, and also tell other women that they can do what men do.
All right. Thank you, Dicta.
Thank you so much for hosting us. This was very nice and enlightening. I would also just say that whenever you have the opportunity, mentor a woman or two. That's how we fill the gap that exists.
I totally agree with you. And finally, to Ruth, what are your final thoughts
Yeah.
on?
So for me, I would say building networks and support systems. I want to embrace these sisters that I've seen and we've shared this space this evening. Let's create opportunities to share our experiences and strategies to how to overcome the challenges that face us in whatever environment we're working in. Every one of us has a story to tell. We cannot all have similar stories. Let's train and give skills to our journalists in the newsroom and ensure that we equip them with the necessary skills and knowledge that they need to excel in whatever field they're in. And then advocacy and mentorship, very important. Let's hold each other's hands.
Thank you so
Yeah.
very much. I love every bit of my time with you. We will continue to hold each other's hand. Thank you, Dita Asimwe, for joining us from Uganda. We truly appreciate. Thank you, Gabriel Nina, for joining us from the DRC. We know that you had a bit of issues with your flight, but you made it to be here. Thank you immensely. And of course, Ruth, for joining us as well from Kenya. I'm truly grateful for this time. And we're also grateful to the Coalition for Women in Journalism for amazing and incredible work you're doing. So we see each other again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.